Hey, so we're in chapter 10 of Isaiah, and before we get into it, I just wanted to talk a little bit about kind of where we are, and because chapters 10 and especially 11 are going to be talking about Christ coming back. So, so basically, just wanted to discuss that just a little bit to kind of give us like a time frame of where we're at here. So, also because we read a lot of these scriptures and we think, well, why didn't they listen? Or, they had so much warning Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. And, it's easy to sit back and think that. And then, um, but I mean, you think about it, how many people do we know that don't see what's going on now and don't recognize the times that we're in? So I think that kind of comes into play here. And so, anyway, the Bible tells us that at the second coming of Christ, because Christ is going to come back twice, he's going to come back first for us, his church. The second time, he's going to come back with the wrath of God. Um, so it tells us at the second coming that there's going to be a super state emerging in Europe. And while this super state is emerging, and you can read about that in Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 9, which we'll get to in this Bible study. But while the super state emerges, um, it'll have a population 3 times the size of the United States. So it's going to be huge. And they try to take control of the entire earth. So at that time, the Soviet Union is going to arm and they're going to gather their allies, okay? And the allies are listed in Ezekiel 38. I do have them wrote down and I'll read them to you here in just a second. So once they come into play, they start getting armed and trying to come against Israel, and they start getting all their allies together. So that's going to be Eastern Europe, Germany, and Poland, the Balkan states, Yugoslavia, Romania, Turkey, Iraq and Iran, Libya, Persia, Ethiopia. So these places are going to be allied with the Soviet Union, and they're going to come against Israel. Um, so then we have, if you do read Ezekiel 38, I wrote down how you get those. So chief equals Russia. Mishkash is Moscow. Tubal is Tobolsk, and those are Russian cities. Gomer equals Germany. Togarmah is the Balkan states. Yugoslavia, Romania, and Turkey. And then there are some places that aren't going to be in alliance with this. They're going to be against the alliance. So they are called Sheba and Dedan. This is still in Ezekiel 38. Sheba and Dedan is Saudi Arabia. Tarshish is England. And the young lions, a lot of people believe, are America, Australia, and Canada. Don't know, but a lot of people do say that they are the young lions. So, um, Saudi Arabia, England, America, um, and Canada, Australia are all in objection to the attack of Israel. Right. So, with that timeline, we know that tribulation um, is going to be the last half of Daniel's 70th week. And tribulation, Daniel's 70th week lasts for 7 years. 3.5 years into that, we know the Antichrist is going to, at the beginning of 7 years, he's going to establish a treaty and promote peace. 3.5 years into that, he's going to break that treaty and he's going to go into the temple and declare himself God, become the abomination of desolation. And that's when God's told the people to flee, people of Judea. to flee into the wilderness. Okay, so I have some notes here written down. So he's going to be a coming world leader. He will be defined by the 7 year period because everyone will be deceived by him. He'll break the treaty and then become the abomination of desolation. I've already told you this, but I'm just reading over my notes here. Um, so, the important part of what I'm trying to get across in this here is that in order for the Antichrist to enforce a treaty, um, he has to come to power first. So, he can't come to power until he appears publicly. And he can't appear publicly until we're gone, until the church is gone. Because Paul tells us, I think it's in Second Thessalonians, yeah, that we will be raptured and the Holy Spirit has to be gone before the Antichrist can rise up. So, just some words of maybe comfort and kind of let you know in perspective about where things are. So, yeah, he can't appear publicly and he can't enforce any treaties until then. So, something about the Abraham Accord that's recently been talked about. So, that opens up the door for an Israeli Arab um, peace treaty, which what that would do is they would get their land for, like where the Dome of the Rock is. They would get their land for the temple. And the Antichrist, one of the things he will do is help them build their temple. So that's huge. It is huge that that treaty was brought into play, and it's significant because it does open up the door for Arab-Israeli peace, and it might be, in fact, that might be, in fact, what this coming world leader is going to try to enforce is a Arab-Israeli peace. So, okay. I've got a few more notes here. So, just a few more things about where we are today as far as that goes. So, there will probably be a one world religion. It will probably be a mixture of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, melting pot. Um, don't know that, but it probably going to be those. The Antichrist is going to make sure that you just worship him. And there'll be a false prophet also involved in that. And so we know from Scripture that the um, mother of all harlots is the Catholic Church, okay, the Roman Catholic Church. So that is ruled from the Vatican, more specifically. And so we do know that Pope Francis recently went to the Arabian Peninsula, like last year. He signed a peace treaty with Islam, and it is called um, it is called the Document on Human Fraternity for World Peace. And basically, what he says is that diversity of religions are willed by God. So, honestly, God doesn't even like religion. God likes relationship, and yeah, I don't think that. I know that the only way to heaven is through Christ, and if you don't believe in Christ, then you're not getting there. So, yeah, diversity of all religions is willed by God, not so much. So, not if they don't, not the true doctrine, true gospel. All right. So, also recently this year, he has spoken in defense of civilian laws for same-sex couples, and we all know that that's uh, not looked upon as it's looked upon as a sin in the Bible. Um, so basically, with that being said, our world we're moving into like a melting pot um, looking at probably one world religion, um, one world monetary system, and that, of course, leads into a one world leader. And it seems like today, if you look at everything that's going on, that's kind of what we're heading towards. So now that I've spent like 10 minutes going over this, I'll try to get into chapter 10 here. Make sure that I read everything that I had down. All right, so sometimes, just so you know, in the Bible, when man is the one who created chapters, divisions, and sometimes they aren't right. So actually, the first four verses in Isaiah chapter 10 actually go with chapter 9, but I didn't do it like that, so we're going to go over those now. So, all right. And I'm reading from NIV today just because it's easier to understand. And when I study, I use King James Version, but today I'm just going to read in this. So, verse 1: Woe to those who make unjust laws, to those who issue oppressive decrees, who deprive the poor of their rights and withhold justice from the oppressed of my people, making widows their prey and robbing the fatherless. All right, so um, basically, what he's saying here is woe unto these people who make laws to oppress the poor, governments, and unrighteous decrees to keep people in poverty. And so, also, what he's talking about is if you want to look at like maybe evangelical TV people that beg you for your money and say, we'll, issue a healing prayer or whatever. If you send us a gift, a donation, blah, blah. So these people like living in mansions and have their own private planes and things like that. So that's not, that's talking about these people. So that's not something that God likes. It's not something that he looks upon. You've got some, 80-year-old widow that's living off her pension or maybe Social Security, digging into her pockets, giving you, who lives in a mansion, everything she's got. Yeah, not so good. So, woe to you is right. Um, so that's one thing that he's talking about. Another thing I want to mention is that I've done some studying on this topic, and the Vatican is one of the richest establishments and the oldest, richest establishments in this world. So they have kept the Latin countries poor, and because they rule over those countries. So it's just something else to think about. Um, so Second Peter tells us that you recognize false prophets and teachers um, with their insincere, feigned words that make merchandise of you. So, and it says their covetousness, their greed, with feigned words that make merchandise of you. So basically, that's what we were just talking about: the widows, the fatherless, oppressing the poor, people that can't read between the lines. Okay, so all right. Verse 3: What will you do on the day of reckoning, when disaster comes from afar? To whom will you run for help? Where will you leave your riches? Nothing will remain but to cringe among the captives or fall among the slain. Yet for all this his anger is not turned away, and his hand is upraised or stretched out still, as in King James Version. So, as you know, in chapter 9, he said that 4 times. He's going to be saying it again in here. So, turn the page here. Okay, so I'm going to chapter 5, or verse 5. Woe to the Assyrian, the rod of my anger, in whose hand is the club of my wrath. I send him against a godless nation. I dispatch him against a people who anger me, to seize loot and snatch plunder, and trample them down like mud in the streets. So, 5 and 6. So, Assyria, God is calling on here Assyria to trample his people, to conquer them, take them captive. Um, But Assyria doesn't see God using them. So this is a problem because they think that this is all by their will and they're prideful about it. So they think they don't realize that God is using them as, and he says, the rod of my anger. Okay, so um, Assyria is his rod, his instrument that he's using against them. So, oh, we'll go down through 9. But this is not what he intends, and he's talking about the Assyrians here. But this is not what he intends. This is not what he has in mind. His purpose is to destroy, to put an end to many nations. Are not my commanders all kings, he says? We'll stop there for a second, or I'll read verse 9. Has not Kalno fared like Karshemish? So he's comparing them to old world countries, and so what he's saying is that he's just wanting to wipe them all out, and to be done with them. And he thinks that since they don't know that God is using them as an instrument for him, they think they're doing this all themselves. And so they just say, well, why stop at the northern kingdom? Why don't we just take it all? So that's what they're saying here. Very conceited. All right. So he says in verse 9, I'll read it again. Has not Kalno fared like Karshemish? Is not Hamath like Arpad, and Samaria like Damascus? Verse 10, as my hand sees the kingdoms of the idols, kingdoms whose images excelled those of Jerusalem and Samaria. 11, shall I not deal with Jerusalem and her images as I dealt with Samaria and her idols? So he's saying that he just wants to wipe them out. So, and he's talking about their idols here, because they think that their gods are superior to God, and or even their idols by this verse, and he thinks that they've helped them gain control, so they really are way far off in knowing that God is using them. So they think that they can conquer Judah as well. Okay, so they end up going to encamp around them. And Sennacherib, I guess that's how you pronounce his name. Um, he was taunting. They were outside the wall of Jerusalem, and um, they have, I guess they had people that spoke for them. Like Sennacherib was the king of Syria, and they had people that spoke for them called Rabshakeh. So anyway, this Rabshakeh was taunting the people along the watchmen along the wall in Jerusalem, and saying, don't listen to Hezekiah. He's not telling you the truth. God really isn't going to save you from this. What about the other gods and the places that we conquered? They didn't help them. What makes you think that your God's going to help you? They were taunting them, right? So he was challenging them, and they were really distraught about it. So you can read about it in 2nd Chronicles 32. But so anyway, they're saying that God couldn't defend them and that Hezekiah was lying to them when he was telling them that God was going to take care of this for them. Because remember, Assyria conquers the northern kingdom, not Judah, not the southern kingdom. So, but they do go down to try to conquer them as well. So God comes to their aid, and he hears what the Assyrian king, Rabshakeh and Sennacherib, what they're saying about him. So he takes care of it. So what he does is he sends an angel in one night, and he wipes out 185,000 troops from around the wall. And what happens after that is that Rabshakeh, Sennacherib, goes back to, I think it's Rabshakeh, goes back to his temple. Yeah, he goes back to his temple, and he's assassinated. And that was actually prophesied before it happened. So we'll go down to verse 13 here. So God wipes them out, okay? They don't get to Judah because God takes care of it beforehand. All right. Actually, we'll start at verse 12. When the Lord has finished, all his work against Mount Zion and Jerusalem, he will say, I will punish the king of Assyria for the willful pride of his heart and the haughty look in his eyes, for he says, by the strength of my hand I have done this, and by my wisdom, because I have understanding. I removed the boundaries of nations, I plundered their treasures. Like a mighty one, I subdued their kings. As one reaches into the nest, so my hand reached for the wealth of the nations. As people gather abandoned eggs, so I gathered all the countries. Not one flopped a wing or opened its mouth to chirp. So he's boasting big time here, saying that it was all him. He's very prideful, and as we know, God hates pride. Okay, so I've said that before in our Bible studies. So something that we can take from that is that any kind of accomplishments or anything that you've done in your life, they're not because of you. They're because of God, because of His hand on you, because of what He's done in you, and we are instruments of God. We're not, without Him, we would just be useless. So that's something to think about, and that's what he's saying here. And he goes on in the next verse and starts to talk about that too. So God is in control. We are not in control of things, okay? We're here for his purpose and to be his instrument. So in verse 15 it says, does the axe raise itself above the person who swings it, or the saw boast against the one who uses it? As if the rod were to wield the person who lifts it up, or a club brandish the one who is not wood. So basically, he's saying that an axe without somebody to swing it is just an axe. It's not anything. So that's like God for us, okay? And that's what this Assyrian king is basically saying, is that um, he doesn't realize he's just an instrument that God is using him, and that he has no power without him. All right. Verse 16, therefore the Lord Almighty, will send a wasting disease upon his sturdy warriors. Under his pomp a fire will be kindled like a blazing flame. The light of Israel will become a fire, their Holy One a flame. In a single day it will burn and consume his thorns and his briars. So the light of Israel is who? Jesus. And he's actually referred to as the light of Israel here, which is um, really cool. All right, verse 18, the splendor of his forest and fertile fields it will completely destroy, as when a sick person wastes away, and the remaining trees of his forest will be so few that a child could write them down. So he's getting ready to talk about the remnant, and we've heard that idiom before, that they will be so few that a child could write them down. So, as you found out, I told you in the beginning that Isaiah does talk about a remnant a lot, and he does. He talks about a remnant a lot, because God seems to work with that model a lot, like a remnant of people. If you think about it, the flood, you had a whole world full of people, maybe billions of people, and so how many people did he save out of that? 8. He saved 8 people. There was a remnant there, and so and you read about the Babylonian captivity when they're freed and they're able to go back home. You can read in Ezra that they think it was about 50,000 people out of all the people in Jerusalem, in the northern kingdom, Israel. Only 50,000 people were released after captivity. So a remnant again. So and also, in tribulation, then obviously there's a remnant that we've talked about before that will be saved through tribulation. So all right. All right, the remnant of Israel. And verse 20, we're in verse 20 now. So in that day, the remnant of Israel, the survivors of Jacob, will no longer rely on him who struck them down, but will truly rely on the Lord, the Holy One of Israel. The remnant will return, a remnant of Jacob will return to the mighty God. We are talking about end time stuff here, and we're also talking about local application here again. So after about verse 23, we're talking about tribulation, but it also has a local application too. Sorry. So also before we get started in these, you should know that there's like 33 titles for the Antichrist in the Old Testament, and one of those titles is the Assyrian. So don't know if he's going to be an Assyrian or not, but um, one of those titles is the Assyrian. So just wanted you to know that before we get to reading in these. Um, all right. So a remnant will return, a remnant of Jacob will return to the mighty God. 22. Though your people be like the sand of the sea, Israel, only a remnant will return. Destruction has been decreed, overwhelming and righteous. The Lord Almighty, will carry out the destruction decreed upon the whole land. Therefore, this is what this is what the Lord Almighty says. My people who live in Zion, do not be afraid of the Assyrians who beat you with a rod and lift up a club against you as Egypt did. Very soon my anger against you will end, and my wrath will be directed to their destruction. So God's telling them here that um, they're conquering them, but then now he's gonna conquer the Assyrians. Okay, so this is also I wrote down this is about the yoke of the Antichrist. So when he says, therefore, this is what the Lord Almighty says, my people who live in Zion, do not be afraid of the Assyrians who beat you with a rod and lift up a club against you as Egypt did. So this has a futuristic application, and this is also talking about the yoke of the Antichrist, and that God is going to take it off of him. So Messiah will take it off of him. So because I'm reading in NIV, some of this is worded different than what I have written down, so it's confusing me a little bit. But all right. Very soon my anger against you will end, and my wrath will be directed towards their destruction. Verse 26. The Lord Almighty will lash them with a whip, and when he struck as when he struck down Midian at the rock of Oreb, and he will raise his staff over the waters as he did in Egypt. And obviously, um, he's talking about the rock of Oreb. That's in Joshua with Gideon and the 300 and all that. It's in Joshua 7. And then the slaughter at Midian, he's talking about Moses' rod in Egypt. So, all right, 27. In that day, their burden will be lifted from your shoulders, their yoke from your neck. The yoke will be broken because you have grown so fat. So, I have written here as a note that the anointing or the anointed one is referring to Hezekiah, but also referring to Christ in the future aspect. So obviously NIV does not have that translation. I'll just change it here real quick because it's becoming a pain. Okay, so in the New King James Version, it says, "It shall come to pass in that day that his burden will be taken away from your shoulder and his yoke from your neck, and the yoke will be destroyed because of the anointing oil." Now, some versions say because of the anointed one, and that's the one that I was thinking of. Um, so the next verses, they're going to be talking about Armageddon and the battle. So Isaiah, what he does in these next verses is he kind of is like a commentator, and he kind of gives you like a play-by-play of how it's going. So what he does is he geographically gives you their location, and as they get closer and closer. So So we'll start at verse 28. So it says, "He has come to I. I think it's I. I don't think you pronounce the th, but he has come to I. He has passed Migron at Mishmash. He has attended his to his equipment, um, which in the King James version says chariots or baggage. Okay, um, they have gone along the ridge. They have taken up lodging at Geba. Rama is afraid. Gibeah of Saul has fled. Lift up your voice, O daughter of Yalam. Cause it to be heard as far as Laish. O poor Enoth. Madmena has fled. The inhabitants of Gebim seek refuge. We're at 32 now. As yet, he will remain at Nob that day. He will shake his fist at the mount of the daughter of Zion, the hill of Jerusalem. So we'll stop at 32. And I'll tell you what these are. So, so I told you he's giving you a play-by-play, like, where they're at. And so he's predicting the Assyrian attack, okay? But in the future application, he's also talking about nations gathering together, like getting their tanks and stuff together because they're moving towards the land of Megiddo. But this is also about the Assyrians trying to attack them too. So, um, verse 28, Ai, so that's 30 miles northeast of Jerusalem. So that's where he starts, okay? And then he says Migron, okay, that's also 30 miles just north. And Mishmash, it says he laid up his baggage. Here it said, I can't remember, but anyway, it means tanks and chariots. Mishmash is only 7.5 miles north of Jerusalem, so he's telling them, where they are. Here they come. They're coming. So progressively, he's giving you like a play-by-play. Um, so Gibeah is only 6 miles northwest of Jerusalem. Ramah is 6 miles north. And then Gibeah of Saul is only 4 miles. And then in verse 30, he says Ananoth. Okay, so we know that that is the place where Jeremiah was born. And it was also a city of refuge. So a city of refuge, I don't think I've talked about this before. Ananoth is 3 miles north. Okay, but city refuge is I've talked about the kinsman redeemer and the avenger of blood, and so what a city of refuge is when someone accidentally murders or kills someone, then the next of kin of the person that died, um, they have the right to take the life of the person who killed them. So they had city of refuge, these certain cities that were pointed out that were cities of refuge that they could flee to, and they would be protected in these cities as long as it was an accident. If it was premeditated, no. But the next of kin, the avenger of blood of that person's life, was going to get to you. But if it was an accident, then the avenger of blood of that person's next of kin couldn't get to you because you were in a city of refuge, and you had to stay there and you could not leave until the high priest died. So, and if you did for some sort of reason, then the avenger of blood could get you with no punishment. All right. So, and Jesus is our avenger of blood. So, just wanted to point that out. So, Ananoth is a city of refuge and is 3 miles north of Jerusalem. And so then we come down to verse 31 and it talks about Madmena and Gibeon. They're like 1 to 2 miles north. And then it gets to Nob. And Nob is inside of Jerusalem, okay? So today we would know Nob as Mount Scopus. And so what Isaiah essentially is saying here is that they are inside of Jerusalem. So, but basically we know that they're attacking, they're threatening Jerusalem, but they don't get it. They don't get it done. So we know that Jerusalem does not get conquered by Assyria. but actually, Babylon conquers Jerusalem in like 606 BC. Nebuchadnezzar does that. So God steps in and he doesn't let them conquer Jerusalem. And like I said, you can read about that in Second Chronicles. The whole story's there about the angel. God sends the angel down. He wipes out 185,000 troops, and they turn around and they leave. And so, and God did that to them because they were boasting, saying that He wasn't going to defend Judah and His people, and He did. So He proved them wrong, which I love about Him. It's one of the things I love about Him is He's when he does things like that, prove Him wrong, do it. So, okay, like I said, it has a future application. When he was given a play-by-play, these were also nations getting their allied forces together in the land of Megiddo, getting ready for Armageddon. So, getting their tanks ready for Armageddon. So, as you know, this leads up to, and I'll read the last little bit of this. So, we ended at 32. And 33, behold, the Lord of hosts, will lop off the bough with terror. Those of high stature will be hewn down. The haughty will be humbled. He will cut down the thickets of the forest with iron, and Lebanon will fall by the mighty one. So this leads us into chapter 11. And in chapter 11, we're going to be talking about Christ's return, his second coming, and glory, and a little bit about the kingdom age. So I'm sorry this took a little longer today. I just wanted to explain some of that stuff in the beginning. So I hope you got something, and I hope you have a blessed day, and I'll see you next time.